front and center, right?
I could afford
Yeah, she's there with the kids, so.
They're going to play some music and then they're going to...
We are so old between us.
This is an actual diary, yes.
Yeah.
So,
Sure. Okay. Oh, great.
Another lifetime. Oh, sorry.
welcome. My name is Maeve Clark and I'm Coordinator of Adult Services here at the Iowa City Public Library. Tonight is the first event in our programs on the commemoration of the 150th anniversary of the Civil War. The Iowa City Public Library is one of 50 sites nationwide selected to host the Civil War 150 exhibition and to receive a grant supporting programming based around the Civil War. The library is extremely pleased to have been selected as a site for this exhibition. If you haven't seen it, it is out in our new space that we call the gallery. There are also a number of Civil War books that you're welcome to check out, and if you would like more, we have literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books on the Civil War. They continue to be written, particularly now during the 150th commemoration of the Civil War. The Gilder Leherman Institute developed the exhibition that we have in our gallery to mark the Civil War sesquicentennial. The Civil War 150 is divided into 5 panels. The Nation Divides, 1861. The Union is Dissolved, This Cruel War, 1863. Turning Points, and the Price of Victory, 1864 to 1865. Drawing from the Gilder Leherman collection, each section traces major events during the Civil War. We have a link on our website to the Gilder Leherman Civil War 150 website, and it is an incredibly rich resource that links to other sites and links to other sites and links to other sites. So you could probably spend the 5 years of the time period that they have on their exhibition looking at all of the Civil War sites. We have flyers of all the activities we have planned. There are many throughout this 3-week period. One thing I wanted to highlight is that we have a book discussion on May 4th and 10:30 in the morning in Meeting Room E, and we have a limited number of copies of this book available for free. So if you would like your own copy of the book, you can go up to the reference desk on the 2nd floor, and we would be glad to give you one. So tonight what we're going to do, we have sort of a different approach to this because we are in Iowa City and we have just a wealth of performers and a wealth of scholars to share their abilities with us. So we're going to start out with music, and our 3 musicians are Guy Drollinger, if you want to wave, Dave Hicks, and Mike Haverkamp. You may recognize 1, 2, or all 3 of these fellows, and we're going to begin. They'll do some performing, singing, playing, and they promise to tell stories along the way. After a couple of songs, then we're going to turn it over to our scholar, Greg Prickman, who is the Director of Special Collections and the University of Iowa Archives, and he is going to talk about this fabulous project that the University Special Collections has on transcribing Civil War diaries and letters. And what a perfect program to begin our programming with actual Iowa diaries and letters. You can't bring the war any closer than people who lived here at that time. And after Greg is done, and he'll take questions, we'll go back and have music. And I was looking for kinds of treats to have for the this program, and I kept coming across gingerbread, gingerbread, gingerbread. So tonight we have ginger snaps, and we have lemonade, and we have water, probably a lot healthier water than you would have had during that time period. And actually, we probably should have had some homemade beer and whiskey, but we don't have that tonight. But afterwards, you're welcome to go out and enjoy it. And I do want to say one last thing about the Gilder Leherman Civil War 150 exhibition. It is also brought to us through the Library of America and the National Endowment for the Humanities, so we thank them as well. So, fellas, you want to sing and play and talk? Thank you.
Thank you very much. At the Iowa State Public Library, we're really pleased to be here. We've been playing together off and on for many years, and we always go back to some of these tunes, actually. Some of the Civil War era tunes are just such great tunes. And we're going to start off with one called Soldier's Joy, or Payday in the Army, they used to call it. And then and we'll go into the Golden Slippers. 1, 2, 3, go! tunes that I learned from my grandfather, Charlie Drollinger. My grandfather was born in 1892, and I asked him one time, I says, well, Granddad, I said, they didn't have like bluegrass festivals or Irish festivals or anything like that. I said, where did you play at? And he says, well, he says, I used to entertain Civil War soldiers. And I thought, oh, it just didn't make sense. And I started counting up the years, and I realized, wow, if he was born in 1892 and he was a hot fiddler by 10 years old, that those guys were in their 50s or 60s. So he actually entertained the actual Civil War soldiers when he was playing fiddle as a young man in southern Iowa, northern Missouri. And I always thought that was amazing, that I got to learn some tunes from him. And I learned both those tunes from my granddad. Actually, the Golden Slippers was one of his big hits. That he used to hold his bow between his, I can't do it, but he'd hold his bow like this between his knee, and he'd play like that. And anyway, okay.
Why don't you sing Hard Times?
Okay. Beautiful song,
Stephen Foster song.
and definitely of the era. One, two, three. Let us pause in life pleasures and countless many tears, while we all sub sorrow with the poor. There's a song that will linger forever in our ears. Oh, hard times come again no more. 'Tis a song, the sigh of the weary. Hard times come again no more. Any day you have lingered around my cabin door. Oh, hard times come again no more. While we seek mirth and beauty and music light and gay, there are frail forms fainting at the door. Oh, their voices are silent, their fleeting looks will say, oh, hard times come again no more. 'Tis a song, the sigh of the weary. Hard times come again no more. Many days you have lingered around my cabin door. Oh, hard times come again no There's a pale sorrowed maiden who toils a life away with a worn heart whose better days are o'er. Oh, her voice would be Mary's pleading all the day. Oh, hard times come again no more. 'Tis a song, the sigh of the weary. Hard times come again no more. Any day you have lingered round my cabin door. Oh, hard times come again no more. There's a sigh that is wafted across the mighty sea. There's a wail that's heard upon the shore. There's a dirge that is murmured around the holy grave. Oh, hard times come again no more. 'Tis a song, the sigh of the weary.
Yeah, one more. Why not?
One more. We thought you'd never ask.
Rally around the flag.
Which one?
Rally
Rally
around the
around the
flag. Or,
Sure.
or Gary Owen.
Can I do one on harmonica? Sure, I can
I
do
don't care,
those.
either one.
Yeah, either one of those. Let's go for it.
What do you want to play? What do you want to play, Dave?
Yeah, Dave, come on.
Play
Gary Owen.
Gary Owen, and you play your flute.
There you go.
Besides period music, this is actually a period instrument.
Actually, yeah, this instrument was around during the Civil War, but it was actually in England. It's a wooden flute with it's an 8-keyed flute, the type they made. This one was made before they had invented the silver flute. It was made in 1845 by Rudel and Rose of Covent Garden, London. It's used in Irish music now, but it was the type of instrument you would have seen played during the Civil War. So, and we'll play a tune that was common then. It's actually General Custer's cavalry theme song called Gary Owen.
I bet the 7th used it even in the Civil War.
I think they did. I think he used that all along. Let's get it.
All right, well, I'm not exactly sure how to transition here from that to a talk. And not only that, but a talk about, well, the sort of thing that a lot of people consider to be old, dusty files and documents. And not only that, but their digital equivalent, which is even drier in some ways. And one of the things that we often struggle with in the area that I work in, special collections, archives, is trying to take this material and deliver it to people in the way that they want to find it, but also to imbue it with some sense of that life that it had when it was created, the environment that it was created in. And I think something like the music gives us that sense of a real, tangible human experience. And that's something that we're trying to get people to connect with in new ways through this project that we've done at the University of Iowa. So my name is Greg Prickman, and I'm head of special collections and university archives down the hill at the University Library. And I'm here to talk about the digital collection that we put together of Civil War diaries and letters that's drawn from the material we have in special collections, and primarily to talk about the project that we devised to transcribe these digital materials through a crowdsourcing effort. And I will explain how that all worked, and also some of the things that we learned in the process of doing that project. And then we'll end with excerpts from 3 different collections of I brought 2 letters and 1 diary, and I'll read an excerpt from all 3 of those to give you a sense of what some of the material in the collection is like. So this goes back to 2009. Back in 2009, we made a commitment to digitize all of our Civil War era manuscript material, so everything that was handwritten as opposed to printed books. We have a decent number of printed books about the Civil War as well, but this is handwritten manuscript material. And so in 2009, we figured we would launch a digital collection of this material in time for the sesquicentennial beginning in 2011. We had digitized a small portion of our Abraham Lincoln holdings for the bicentennial of Lincoln's birth in 2009. And related to that, there had been an earlier project to digitize a few of our Civil War diaries. A student had taken that on a couple years prior. And so as we started to think, what's the next, we put all this effort into Lincoln, what's coming up? And we started planning for the sesquicentennial. We thought, well, we've got a little bit of this stuff digitized. What if we did all of it? And the goal really was to try to take that era and digitize all of that material, rather than just selecting highlights, or maybe this is a really important collection and this is a little more ordinary. Let's just try to scan all of it and make it all available online without us doing filtering anything out. So that was the main goal of the project, which was fairly ambitious given the number of items. But it was sometime in the summer of 2010, it was clear that it looked like we were going to be on target to complete the scanning of all that material in time for the sesquicentennial, which began, of course, in April of 2011. So basically, what we were creating was a digital collection. Thousands and thousands of images, digital images of handwritten text. And we wanted, in this case, as this was coming together, to really take this beyond just a static digital collection online. We can tell people this stuff is available, you can read it and use it, but that's really the only life it has, and we wanted to try to enhance it, do something more with it. So that's when this idea of transcription came up. By transcribing the text, we thought, well, this is going to be a way to make it more usable. And by employing crowdsourcing, we were thinking, well, because this is Civil War era material, there's sort of a built-in audience of enthusiasts who will likely be drawn to this and may want to participate. So the reason for the transcription is, as I said, the handwritten pages get digitized. It's an image. The thing that goes into our digital library, which you access online, is an image. That's a picture of a page or a sheet. So when we create these digital images, we have to add information to the image to make it searchable. We call that metadata. So anyone who's using the system, your ability to find specific pages, in that case, is completely dependent on the information that we put with that image. So it all depends on how well we describe them. Now, when you're engaged in a project like this, and of course the Civil War stuff was one of several digitization projects going on at the same time, when you're dealing with that scale of images needing metadata, you just can't labor and labor over every single one. You have to get into a stream where you can move through this stuff and get it online. So the goal is to make it as searchable and as useful as we can. What transcription does is, by actually having someone type out the words that they see in the image of the page, that that type text gets added into the metadata for that image. That then is searchable. So any search engine that's going through that information can find specific words, phrases, dates, anything like that. And once the search is run, take you directly to that page. So suddenly it's searchable. We don't have to make the decisions about what should we say about this page versus that page. We can just have it out there, and the entire thing is searchable. So the transcription project, I'll give you a little bit of background about how we got that all set up and how it worked, and then what happened once we launched it. The transcription project has been successful, and that's in spite of the fact that its origins weren't really all that glamorous. Our approach was largely driven by the resources that we had for it, which was really nothing. We didn't have a budget to do a project like this that had been approved. We didn't have any special software or systems in place to handle the transcriptions. We didn't really have any time for development of tools like that. And we didn't really even ask for permission from any administrator to do this. We just thought, let's just see. We just gave it a shot. So basically, I went to our webmaster and said, is there any way we could just kind of make a site, make a page where someone could enter a transcription of a digital image? And she said, kind of, hemmed and hawed. I don't know, that's going to be tough. So I went away and I thought, well, maybe we'll someday have a chance to do something like that. And it was really very shortly thereafter that she emailed this link, somewhat dynamic, be more so think we want to pursue. And so she just sort of pulled together a test site very quickly. And suddenly it looked like we had a real possibility here. So basically the site as it was first launched looked like this. And this, in terms of function, is very much like what she had initially proposed. We just dressed it up a little bit with, you have to go for the color effect with Civil War era. But this page actually doesn't really exist anymore because the project has transitioned away from this interface. But basically, our goal was to keep this as simple as possible. And again, that's largely because we didn't really have the time to develop really complicated tools. So all you would do, you get a progress bar there, and that shows you how much of any one of these collections has been transcribed. So you click on one that looks interesting for some reason, and you're taken to a page. You can actually see this is a thumbnail, really, of the page that would come up. And you get an image of, in this case, the diary page. And there's a box here, and there's little instructions here that say, essentially type what you see as it's spelled. And you can't read this, but it says name optional, and then there's another box down there that says email optional, and then submit. So all this is you type something into that box, the transcription. If you feel like sending us your email address, you can, but you don't have to. You hit submit, that's it. What that did was it sent an email to an email box that was set up with the text of the transcription for that particular image, so the two were paired up. And that's as high-tech as it was. Basically then a person, an actual human being, would check that transcription against the image of the original to verify that it was accurate. And then, if it looked okay, that text gets copied into the metadata field back in this other system that holds the original digital image. And that's sort of the end of the cycle. I think I got. Yeah, so this is the system that actually holds all of our digital images. And the metadata, this is just a portion. If this was the full screen, we'd have fields all the way down here. But this is the metadata field in the record is full text. So this is where the text gets pasted in, and then it's associated with this particular image. That's pretty much it. We launched the site in May 2011, so right around the time that the sesquicentennial began. We had an exhibition down in the main library on campus that opened in April that year. So we had a lot of stuff going on, and we were announcing all this activity as the sesquicentennial was beginning. And of course, there was a lot of national stuff going on as the commemoration began. And so with this project, we announced it through the usual channels, press releases, blog entries, that sort of thing. And it was fairly quiet after we launched it in terms of activity. But as the summer sort of wore on, we're into June, and we had a student working down in the digital unit at the time, and he sent the link to the American Historical Association, and they put it on their blog, June 7th, 2011. Had a little write-up about it and links and a screenshot. And then we kind of noticed that a couple of other blogs were picking it up, some personal blogs and I think some other organizational blogs. And then it was very shortly thereafter that somebody posted it on Reddit. Or is anyone familiar with Reddit here? Somebody posted it on Reddit, and they did so under the perhaps apt title of "Today I Learned How to Participate in History While Sitting on My Ass by Transcribing Civil War Diaries Online." With a link. Well, suddenly, when something is posted on Reddit, it draws a lot of attention. And that was certainly the case for us. I suppose you could say that this caused the site to go viral. The site had, let's see, I think I have the figure. The site had over 30,000 page views by 3 o'clock p.m. on that day. At one point, the server was getting 80 simultaneous hits. And only a few of those can go through at any one time. So this pretty much sunk the servers. Didn't go down, didn't crash, but you would get hung up for a long time because it was only letting so many people hit it at one time. So the little, our little under the radar, let's just do this and see what happens project came to the attention of the server administrators, which was a bit of a surprise because they weren't expecting that. But it was fine. There are certain things you can, I don't know what you do. There are certain things you do, and that makes it better. And so they made it better. And then, things settled down. I think it was probably about a 24-hour period where there was this real spike. I've got a slide later that shows that. So then we faced the task, okay, we came up with a system where it's, you do a transcription and it sends an email to an email box, and now we had all this activity, and in fact, a lot of the people who went to investigate the site had entered transcriptions. And so then we had to go through all of those. And my initial reaction was that, well, that's great, but we're probably going to have to filter out a fair number of those in terms of quality. But in fact, the quality was really high of the transcriptions that were sent in, even in this period. But we've noticed that throughout the project. One of the questions that often gets asked in terms of crowdsourcing something like this is, well, what about quality and accuracy? And our experience by just diving into this is that for the most part, the quality is actually really, really good, and that the people who are taking the time, taking their own time to participate in something like this are actually taking it seriously and doing a good job. So the Reddit posting really took the project to a new level, but it really, it was just kind of a flash in the pan. But the strength of the reaction that really has sustained the project is the slower word of mouth that continues even now, and I'll explain that later, the way this has grown. But it's brought dedicated people to this effort who really have contributed a lot of material and really stuck with it over time. In less than a year after launching, nearly 15,000 pages were transcribed, which represented at the time just about all of our Civil War manuscript material that had been digitized. And we had started out, when this was first launched, we had put in a portion of the diaries. Thought, we'll see how it goes. Well, as people started to eat those up, we put in the rest of the diaries, and then those started to go. So then we put all the letters in, and then those started to go. So then, given after the publicity that we got from this project launching, we actually received more Civil War material from donors who heard about it. And so then we digitized that and put that in, and we were sort of just, trying to feed the beast here and keep it going. Basically what we did is that now that the Civil War era material is pretty much transcribed, we made the decision, given the success of that portion of the project, to expand the crowdsourcing transcription effort. So we launched a site called DIY History last fall, and that's a portal to several manuscript collections. The Civil War material is still there, but we've been scanning other stuff, and we've been adding that into this new system, and it's much more sophisticated. It has some attributes behind the scenes that make it a lot easier to manage the transcriptions coming in, which allows us to scale up in terms of how much we can accommodate. Probably the most prominent group of materials that has been added in now after the Civil War material was done are manuscript cookbooks from the Zathmary collection that we have in special collections. And not only are these also being transcribed steadily, but it's spawned an offshoot group called the Historic Foodies, who meet monthly to bake and cook recipes from those manuscript cookbooks and try to recreate the historical practices. And a lot of the ways that recipes were written, they're handed down generation to generation in a family. It says bake or cook over a slow fire. There really aren't weights and measures included. So a lot of this is trying to take the recipe and figure out, well, how much of this versus that. And it's an entirely different way for us to think about cooking. Of course, at the time, people would have been taught and would have learned through experience how different ingredients would have come together. So this ongoing effort now, our DIY history project, really it's been built on the lessons that we learned from the Civil War project. So a few observations from that project. This is the statistics for the Civil War diaries over about a year. And I don't have to do too much interpretation here. You can see where Reddit happened. And that was our spike when things got really interesting. And that's fine. But I think the lesson that we learned is that however much attention you can generate through something like that, which sometimes you can try to make that happen, but it's hard to make that happen. It just kind of happens for whatever reason, whatever the circumstances are. And that's great, but you can see as you go down the line, there's bumps throughout. And it's that kind of steady ebb and flow of participants that's really sustained the project. So the joke we like to make now is that the viral aspect of this is fine, but when you get a virus and you get a fever and you're really sick and it goes away, what you want is more like a bad cold, where it hangs around and it's really easy to pass it from one person to another, right? So that's a much better viral event. And we've had some good luck with, Reddit is one thing, but by using Twitter and Facebook and other avenues like that, that has gotten a good response. And Pinterest as well. I thought this was a really interesting reaction from someone. She pinned the site, the transcription site, and then said, "Finding this on Pinterest pushed me over the edge to join. I don't know which is better, getting to see the original manuscripts or the privilege of helping to transcribe them," which I thought was a really good comment. And one of the other lessons that we learned is that we kind of had an expectation of an audience who might be interested in doing this. And I'm not entirely sure that it was borne out by what happened. I think we had a lot of individuals like this who encountered the project who weren't necessarily heavily invested in studying the Civil War. And we certainly heard that anecdotally from many people. And, there are a couple of things, I think there are a couple of reasons. One is going back to how we initially set the thing up, which was to make it really, really simple. And so we would hear from people that, a friend of theirs would send them the link and say, oh, you should take a look at this. And they'd go and they'd say, okay, I'll try this. And they'd transcribe a page and hit submit, and then another one would come up. They'd transcribe that and hit submit. They find hours later they had been going through page after page after page. And we heard that from several people, that they really got invested in the story, and it was really the narrative that they were following, even though they may not have had any particular prior interest in the Civil War specifically. This is borne out by one of our most prolific transcribers, who started to get in touch with us quite frequently about the project. In this back and forth, we discovered that he's actually a retiree from the northwest of England. And he'd read an article about crowdsourcing in the Sunday Times over in England and thought, oh, that sounds interesting, I want to try that. So he went online and he just did a search for a project, and well, lo and behold, our project came up in his search, and he thought it was the English Civil War. So he went and checked it out, took a look, and started transcribing things, and realized that it was the American Civil War, but didn't really care. He got interested in what he was reading, and he kept up at it, and really took it to heart and transcribed a lot of material. I think at one point he had transcribed more than anyone else. That may still be true, to the extent that we can track individuals. But I think, this comment really, to me, is an important lesson. It's the notion of the privilege of transcribing, and I think it's easy for us working in special collections to lose sight of the fact that we're surrounded by this stuff all the time, and that's great. But I think it really means something to people to feel like they're a part of something that they may feel excluded from ordinarily. Either because they can't spend the time to go into a place and spend a lot of time sitting in a reading room studying something, but they can participate in something like this and not only read the material, but actually feel like they're contributing something back that makes it useful, and I think that's really important. So I think that, again, we wanted to do something that was more than just offering images and hoping people would find them useful. And I think it was the stories that you're able to discover when you're actually engaged with the material, not just sort of reading it on a screen, but actually trying to think through what is being said, what are these words. And you really do, you get so engaged that the effort continues. And this is our friend Dave from England. One of the comments he made, he wrote, explaining his interest is this, that these people come alive. You come to share their hopes, their fears, their everyday concerns, the price of food for themselves and for their animals, the cost of doctor's visits, their illnesses, and sadly their deaths. Yes, you do become absorbed in the people, and losing one of them is like losing a relative or a friend. So I think the lesson that we take away from this is that despite the sort of small scale of what we had originally started with, it's this aspect that has taken this project forward. There are there are a lot of crowdsourcing projects now. And even at the time that we initially launched this, some of the most popular crowdsourcing projects were things like Galaxy Zoo is one of them, or Zooniverse, where there's all sorts of astronomy projects going through images, having people identify elements. And that sort of falls under this term citizen science. And that is a really interesting activity, but what we're doing is much different, and I think it is this sense of narrative and story that makes our project different. So what we have now, this is the screen of DIY history. So this is the site that we're currently on right now. And I made this screenshot last night. You can see that now we're up to 33,000 578 pages transcribed. That's all the Civil War material, and then a decent amount of the Zathmary material. We have Niall Kinnock's papers, letters and diaries in there. We have Iowa Byington Reed was an Iowa City resident who kept a diary for decades, late 19th, early 20th century. All of that material's in there. So we continue to add more and more content into DIY history for transcription. And we have more to come. If anything, this project is sort of redefining how we go about thinking about digitization projects. That's certainly true in terms of manuscript collections, handwritten material. It's a good source for that. So if you're interested, this is the URL for the site, DIY History. And as I said, the Civil War material is all still in there. So when you go to the home page and you go to transcribe, you get another screen that has all the collections that you can work on. You'll see Civil War collection comes right up. If you click through to that, I think there's like a browse all link. If you click on that, you'll get a list of all the Civil War collections. And they're transcribed. When you actually click through to them, it says needs review. And that's because one of the next phases of the project for the Civil War material is to get some of our transcribers who feel very connected to the Civil War material to help us with some of the editing that needs to be done now. That is that's getting more eyes on anything that someone had flagged as unreadable or indecipherable. So getting more people to look at that, seeing if we can untangle any of those words. And also some of the normalizing that needs to be done. I mentioned earlier that we asked people to just enter things as they were spelled without trying to correct them. That's so that we have a transcription, a literal transcription of what's written on the page. But ultimately, if this is about computer searching, we have to make sure that the machine can find the search term that someone's going to naturally type. And the spelling, as you might imagine, in these documents is all over the place. So that's another aspect of the project, is to try to start bringing some of that together. So the way we're looking at this is that every step we're taking is to make the material more searchable, more useful, and it will get better over time. We've never proposed that this is an attempt to get a publication quality edited transcription prepared. It's about making the digital collection better, easier to use. So our goal is to keep the process going to make it better over time. But if you go into the Civil War material through DIY history, it's a pretty good way actually to read through some of the diaries and letters if you'd like to do that, because you get a nice image of the page, and then the transcription that has been entered is down below it. And then below that, there's a link you can easily go forwards and backwards in that sequence of the diary or the letters. And so it's a pretty good way to browse through things. So I thought I would close by calling your attention to 3 of the collections of Civil War material that are in there that are some of my personal favorites. So if you're curious and you want to see what this is like and want to read through some things, I'll direct you this way. But you really can't go wrong with a lot of the material that's in there, regardless of what you find. So what am I starting with? I'm going to start with Ferdinand Winslow. I think if I had to choose a favorite, he's actually one of my favorites in all the special collections. He was a quartermaster during the Civil War and was a really interesting writer with a really interesting personality. And this is one of those where once you start reading the letters, you just want to keep going and keep going and keep going. So I brought one of the letters from Ferdinand, and it's up here. Once we're done, you can feel free to come up and take a look at it. This one's actually in really nice condition. And you can see what the original looks like. But I'm going to read you what he wrote in this letter. This is a letter to his wife, so you get a sense of his personality. This is December 6th, 1861. I read today your loving letter of first instance with Louise's and Blem's letter. I don't like the idea of your going to Dubuque. I feel anxiety enough about all kinds of accidents happening to you and the children anyhow, not to have it augmented by a knowledge of the fact that you were going over that railroad which so nearly killed myself. Perhaps you can get something for the Christmas tree in Marion. Anything else wanted, you might ask Mrs. Amos Peasley to buy for you. I know she would do it gladly. The cost of the trip I would rather then invest in livery, hire once to twice a week for an hour's ride or two with Mother. I felt real sick yesterday, but got it into my head to attend the ball given here last night by our officers. I went in with a will to dance the sickness out of my body. And in I went like a maniac. I danced every dance, quadrilles, polkas, and devil-daring gallops from 8 o'clock in the evening till 5:30 in the morning, only with interruption of a glorious supper at midnight. I sweated as I have never in my life. For hours and hours the water streamed out of all my pores, and I worked myself into a perfect passion for dancing in one continuity with everybody, no matter how my partners looked, lean or fat, handsome, and some were very much so, or ugly. When I left this morning, the sun was just about rising, the air was magnificent and bright, and I went directly up and saddled my horse and galloped him for 9 miles till I returned for a hearty breakfast. I have not slept a wink today. Feel, of course, weak and enervated, but I am smoking my cigar while I am writing this letter and feel tip-top, cleaned out over my whole body. It was an excellent cure. I should else have been abed sick today. I was so weak in my legs yesterday forenoon, all my bones ached. My eyes were swollen, nose running, head aching, all sure forerunners of fever, but that demonic dance cured me. I think I shall enjoy a thundering good sleep tonight. By the by, I didn't dream there were such nice girls in existence around this place as I saw last night. Now goodbye. So that's Ferdinand Winslow. Let's see, I'm going to skip to Myron Underwood. He is also writing to his wife. This is November 14th, 1863, and that's this letter here. And this one's a little bit longer. I won't read the whole thing. I'll read an excerpt from it. This is fairly typical of the period. The paper folded to make a little portfolio with the address then on the back. So he's writing to her, I sent by Mr. Woodruff a volume of Shakespeare, as well as a shell, which I would like you to get as soon as you can, for I would not like it soiled. I sent you $20 in a letter some time ago, which you have not said one word about. I also sent you $20 in the last letter before this. I would like it if you would acknowledge it as soon as possible, and I will send you some more. I intend that nothing that I can do shall deter you from school. He's writing to his wife, not his child. I want you to go the 3 terms certain, if not more. I am satisfied that you feel that what is your interest is mine, and what is my interest is yours, and that you will do all that you can for the mutual good, and further, I feel satisfied that you will not spend any more money than you need. You shall have all the money that you want to go to school. I am glad that you have concluded to attend school. I say go to school by all means. I do not want you to feel that I do not want you to go to school, for I do. And I hope that you know me well enough to know that I do not want you to commence anything and then give it up. But if you feel that you are doing right, go through with it. If we fail it, if we fail, his writing is not quite as good as Ferdinand's. If we fail, it is for the want of perseverance on our part. Now do not think that you do not have my approval, for you do. I did not say a word to James about your going to school, for I did not think that it was anything that mattered to him. You can scarcely imagine the pleasure it affords me to think you have a desire to attend school. Are we getting anything out of this? Yeah. You have my hearty and cheerful cooperation. I do not wish you to feel sorry and sad because you are going to school, as long as Addie and you are well, and I shall feel, in a measure, happy. I say measure because I know I could enjoy myself better if I was at home with my family, but you know that I could not do my family and my country justice if I was to stay home at this time. And if you're all curious, I would encourage you to read through Myron's correspondence with his wife. He's a character. It's a fun read. Lastly, I have a diary. This is Mary Shelton's diary. Mary and her sister both wrote diaries that we have in the collection. And they worked with Annie Wittenmeyer during the Civil War. They traveled with her and really were sort of her assistants. And they would split up from time to time and go to different hospitals and camps. So they worked very directly in setting up the activity that Annie Wittenmeyer is so well known for, improving the conditions in the hospitals and the camps, mainly by trying to provide better nutrition to the soldiers as they were recovering. So Mary Shelton and her sister traveled extensively all over the country in all of the theaters of war. And this is one of several diaries that she kept, and you can see it's very small. And again, this is a pretty typical piece for the time. We certainly have quite a few diaries that are larger than this, but you can imagine this, when you're on the road, this was very convenient to keep with you. She actually, in one of the diaries, complains that she lost the previous one and had to start over again. This one is from 1865, and I'm going to read you a couple of entries because they're much shorter. April 14, 1865. Left Pittsburgh early this morning. Delighted with the scenery along the route, especially across the Alleghenies. At Altoona, Mr. Bishop came on the train and was a pleasant companion. In Harrisburg before dark. Nice, warm, good bath, and after prayers I went to sleep. A day long to be remembered. Saturday, April 15, 1865. This morning came the terrible news that President Lincoln had been murdered. And then there's some material that's unclear, and it says, nearly so. We're off at 3 a.m. And found on our arrival at Baltimore that the news was too true. Kind Mr. Warren took us to the hotel, but we were depressed and wretched. The day in keeping with the national gloom. Arrived in W, and that's Washington, about 10 p.m., tired out, walked to 320 NY, New York Avenue. Miss Fowler received us very kindly, many kind letters awaiting me. Sunday, April 16, 1865, one of the dullest Sabbaths I have ever spent. All three too tired to attend church, could hardly summon courage to read our Bibles so utterly worn out with our journey. This first day in the capital of our country has been a sad one indeed. Everybody seems bowed down with grief at our great loss. We can hardly yet believe that our president is gone. Monday, April 17, tried to write today but did little. Mr. W. called on us, walked with Miss Fowler to see Ford's Theater where the president was shot and the house where he died. The girls out at the Capitol and trying to form some idea of this city of magnificent occurrences, in quotes. A profound gloom covers everything. Every home is draped, every face looks sad. May God be near us in these days of trial. And it goes on like that. Wednesday, April 19, started quite early to the White House to see the president lying in state. So great was the crowd that we were more than 3 hours getting in. I could never forget that pale, cold face. Few passed through that did not weep. God's ways are past finding out. Miss Cole came to see us, and we enjoyed it so much. So that's Mary Shelton in the middle of what to us, looking back, of course, is an incredibly historic moment. And I think one of the real appeals of this material, something that, again, we encounter in special collections all the time with the stuff that we have, but the idea that this object was with her in that place at that time, and now it's here for us to experience. We talk about aura, that these materials have an aura of history to them, and I think that's a good example of that. The other thing that comes through to me in her writing is how ordinary life and ordinary experiences go on and continue in the middle of something like that. So her very last statement in that entry, after seeing Lincoln lying in state in the White House, is a visitor who came to see them, and she really enjoyed it. So it's easy for us today to look back on all these events and see the epic sweep of history, but of course, it was always so much more personal and so much quieter than I think we often make it out to be. And that's one of the things that we've tried to do with this project, is to give people an opportunity to encounter some of these materials in a different way and engage with them in a different way. So that's the material I have. One other thing I wanted to mention in terms of Civil War material. Another project that we've launched during this time period is this blog, the Joseph F. Culver Civil War Letters. And yes, this is the Culver family of our former governor and also our former senator. Their ancestor was in the Civil War, and these letters were published by the libraries back in the 70s in a book. And they were heavily annotated at the time by a very prominent Civil War historian. And what we've decided to do is take those letters and distribute them through this blog format. So if you go to the digital library, you can find all these letters, you can read them. They are transcribed. But what we're trying to do with this is allow people to experience the letters as they were written. Not only the sequence in which they were written, but the time span that they were written in. So the most recent entry on the blog is March 26th. This was posted on March 26th of this year. So it's 150 years since the writing of these letters, and we have all of them loaded into the system so that as the months go by, the letters will appear on the blog on the day that corresponds to 150 years since they were written. So you can follow along. One interesting thing is that some people have been following this, and I've been getting emails saying, "Why aren't you updating the site?" So I wrote back to someone this morning, and said, it picks up in June. It really picks up in June. So there's more coming. But if you explore this a little bit, in each case, there's an image of the original. There's the text that you can read, and all of those annotations that have been done describing the people and the places that are mentioned in the letters. Those are also included as well. And they've also all been mapped, so you can follow along on a Google map the progress that he goes through in his experience over the years. And the address is right up there on the top in big letters. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Yeah.
Well, I'm super impressed that there was 30-some thousand pages transcribed, but you also had to scan all those images, didn't you? That
Yes.
sounds like a monumental task in itself. Using
Well-
those different size pieces of paper. And
Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, you're right. It's not a small job to scan all that material. We're at a point now in the library where we have systems and workflows all set up so that we've got a steady stream of stuff being scanned at any given time, really, depending on what the priorities are. Obviously, this sort of thing is pretty easy to scan. You put it on a flatbed scanner, you scan one side, you flip it over, and you scan the other. In that case, the scanning is the easy part. What takes time then is you have two files that have random file names generated by the scanner. So then someone has to take those, change the file name to correspond actually with the barcode that's been assigned to that item, and then a separate item, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces after that. So that all has to be structured. Then they're uploaded to Content DM, is the content management system that we use. And that's when the metadata is entered. And we certainly have to have some kind of name, date, place, metadata added to that image before we ever get to the point of transcribing it. And so, yeah, that takes some time. We employ a lot of students.
So I have a question about that process. Would the same one person do the scanning, then the adding of the address and the name and all that metadata, or is that different people?
It's different people.
Wow.
It's kind of evolved over the years. There were years ago now in the life cycle of digital collections, it would be more typical that would all be done by either one person or all within a department. But now, again, with the scale of what we're doing, there's the scanning takes place in our preservation department, and then all the file management stuff happens in the digital library unit, basically. And the metadata these days is often added by catalogers, which is another department. So it's complicated, but we've got enough of a process set up that it flows, and we can actually handle a lot more stuff that way.
Okay, I have one more question, then I'll pass the mic off. That little bitty journal that you have up there, was that written in ink? And
Yes.
is the print really small? I mean, is it tiny?
It's actually not that tiny, and I mean, you're welcome to come up and take a look. Any of you are when we're done. It's not all that tiny. Basically, what it means is that each entry isn't that long. They're pretty brief, but it's all pre-printed with date information as you can buy today. So she just filled in a little bit each day.
I have a question.
Sure.
So, thank you very much, all of you, for what you've done so far this evening. So, was really intrigued with the first piece that you were reading. Ferdinand, is that
Yes, Winslow.
his name? So now I want to know more about him. Like, I was thinking it would be wonderful if we had his backstory and all the history, like you have with Culver. So, do you know, are people taking those and doing things with them? Are they incorporating them into genealogies that you can find online?
Yes, I don't have a lot of direct evidence of that. We have some anecdotal, things we've heard from people who are doing that sort of thing. I think it will be the sort of thing that now that it's out there in this way, that will start happening more and more frequently. Winslow, I looked into his background for an exhibit, and he was a pretty interesting guy. He ended up surviving the war. He was a quartermaster, but he had, I forget how many children. He had quite a few children. A couple passed away when they were very young. One of the most dramatic moments in his story, spoiler alert, in case if you want to actually read it for yourself, but his wife is pregnant, and he is off in the field, and he gets promoted, and he's doing really well, but his wife is back in St. Louis then. They ended up moving to St. Louis. And she's pregnant, and he wanted to be home with her when the baby came, to the point that he resigned and asked for a furlough, and he tried every single thing he could think of to get out of there. And there are these desperate letters written back to his wife saying, I can't go. They won't let me go. There's, the railroad, the tracks have been, sabotaged. I can't get out of here. And it's sort of building and building. You're reading along. It's just about the point where she's likely to give birth, and the letters stop. And then there's this huge gap, and I think there's a handful of letters, quite a bit. I don't know if it's a year later, but there's a huge gap. And in fact, when you look into his genealogy, there was a child born who lived, so it worked out, but I have no idea how that story ended. His family actually is quite interesting. Two of his sons started one of the ironworks companies in Chicago, and if you're all familiar with Chicago and the facade of what used to be the Carson Peary Scott building on State Street, it has this very elaborate wrought iron facade. They did that. One of these two brothers actually was friends with Frank Lloyd Wright. And Frank Lloyd Wright built his house, and it was one of his first independent commissions as an architect outside of a company. And that house is still standing in Illinois. So there's some very interesting family history beyond just the Civil War era material, too.
Do we have any other questions? Do we have any Civil War diaries out here that you'd like to contribute to the... That is one of the ways you got more
It is.
materials.
Yeah. one woman was out in Washington State and came across mention of the project, and she had diaries that were in her family, and the soldier was in an Iowa regiment, and so she donated those. We got a couple of other donations of pieces that came in that way. So that's great. I mean, we're of course, very happy to keep building a collection however we can. We've also purchased some Civil War material as well. We purchased a set of 11 diaries at an auction, and that was from someone who we already had some material from one of his brothers, and then there was some kind of family split, and we heard from a family member somebody put this stuff at auction, and so we were able to obtain it that way. And we bought some material, some letters from a soldier who was at Camp Pope here in Iowa City as well.
Do we have other questions?
As you digitize everything, what are your thoughts long term in terms of digital storage? I mean, you know how to conserve
Yes.
paper.
Yes.
What are your worries long term with digital?
Well, this is an emerging field because of this very issue. You will hear people say that digital storage, that the cost of that is coming down, and it is. You can buy a 5 terabyte hard drive. I don't know how much that goes for, a couple $100 maybe. Compared to what it was even a few years ago, the costs have decreased. The problem is that on the scale that we're working with now, we're well beyond that. And so it is an issue. All of the files live on servers, and we have different levels of servers. We have publicly accessible, we have what's called dim, and we have dark. And basically the stuff that's on dark is never touched. And the dim, we can make copies of that material from. So there's redundancy in the storage. And because they're on servers and they're not just on some kind of physical media, everything's backed up. Systems are migrated as they're improved, et cetera. So we're fine right now. Things, I think, are working pretty well, and they're pretty stable. We have a good process for that. But it's a real issue moving forward, and especially the more we digitize non-paper material. As we start to digitize audio, and especially film, we're getting a quote right now to digitize just a couple of reels of nitrate film from about 1895 to 1909. And that's within the first 15, 20 years of projected film. And so what we would like to do is get those digitized at the highest resolution we possibly can. And the resolution that's high enough for projection, so you could project this in a professional theater, it's called 4K is the resolution. The file sizes just for these very short, reels of early film are enormous. So there's got to be some decision making there about, is it worth going that high resolution, and it's all about scale again. The more and more of this you do, the bigger a problem it becomes. So I think that's, in the next 10 to 15 years, it's going to be an area of a lot of attention in libraries to start addressing those issues.
Any more questions? I think we'll leave the digital world and go back to the real world
please.
and have some more music, please, our musicians. And please feel free to go up and look at the materials that
Yeah, feel free
Greg
to have
brought.
a
And
look.
thank you very much, Greg. That was
Just a couple of
fascinating.
sheets. I should put in a plug that I only have a couple of sheets here, but any of you are always welcome to come into Special Collections during our public hours and read through anything you want. You don't have to be a scholar, you don't have to be affiliated with anyone, just come in and use the material. You're always welcome to do that.
Do you think you can play from 8 o'clock till 5 in the morning for us? If I can dance? Well, it's going to be short, I think.
Please do come have cookies and lemonade, because we've got some of our ears.
rally once again, shouting the battle cry of freedom. Numbers, the loyal, true, and brave, shouting the battle cry of freedom. For although he may be poor, no man shall be a slave, shouting the battle cry of freedom. It's Union forever, hurrah, boys, hurrah! Down with the traitor and up with the star, as we rally round the flag, boys, rally once again, shouting the battle cry of freedom.
What about a rendition of We'll Hang Jeff Davis from the Sour Apple Tree?
Did we practice that one?
Do we practice any of them?
I got a funny story about that. I don't know if it's true or not. But I heard that during the second day of Gettysburg, when the Confederates had occupied the town, this little girl inside the town opens a window, sticks her head out the window and says, "We'll hang Jeff Davis from the Sour Apple Tree."
Not a good idea.
Brave kid.
The song got cut short.
Yeah,
You don't want these guys in gray uniforms.
Yeah,
mad at
really,
you when you're carrying
not a good idea.
Springfield right.
Yeah, yeah.
Pretty good. What you got, guy? Marching to Joker.
Dixie.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we
That's
had a
right.
version of that when I was in grade school too,
Yeah.
about school.
My knives was in the Gloria.
Burning of the school, tortured all the teachers, broken every rule.
He knows all those.
Killed all
Then
the
there's-
kids and drowned the principal.
Then there's all the horse named Bill lyrics to Dixie. Oh, I had a horse and his name was Bill, and when he ran, he wouldn't stand still, he ran away one day. Also, I ran with him. Now he ran so hard that he would not stop. He ran into a barber shop. He fell exhausted with his eye teeth in the barber's left shoulder. Now I went out to the woods last year to hunt for beer and not for deer. I ain't a great sharpshootress at shooting birds. I am a beaut. There is no bird that I can't shoot in the eyes, in the ears, in the teeth, or the fingernails. Down at Frisco Bay there lived a whale, and she eats pork chops by the bale, and by the hat box, and by the shoe box, and by the hogshead and the schooner. Well, her name is Lena, and she is a peach, but don't leave babies in her reach, or nursemaids, or chocolate ice cream soda. Yeah, had a horse, and his name was Bill, and when he ran, he wouldn't stand still, he ran away one day. Also, I ran with him. Yeah. That's a bunch of nonsense verse to that.
Do you know Lorena? That brought many a tear to a soldier's eyes.
Lauren sings that.
Go
Oh, yeah.
slowly by, Lorena. Yeah, I don't know if
All the notes aren't on there.
Yeah. You got them all. What about Aura Lee? Sing that one. Aura Lee? Ah, all right.
Yeah, there was a story that one time right before battle that Union Army headed on would camp like a few yards from each other. And they knew a lot of them wouldn't see every day. You know, and the bands were playing on both sides.
Yeah.
But one band started striking up Home Sweet Home, and soldiers on both sides joined in.
Oh, there you go.
You guys are welcome to play the song you like, or thank you for bringing the Civil War era.
Sure, yeah, I actually bring that to most gigs I play.
Yeah. Well,
I love
Because
Gary Owen, that's a
I play a
wonderful
lot of other stuff on it that's not necessarily Civil War.
should we finish with the Shokin?
Oh, we could.
Let's finish with
Still can farewell?
Yeah.
Don't make you cry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
For a modern
It's a
tune.
modern Civil War tune now.
All right, guy.
In 1982.
Something like that.
I heard that just last week.
Yeah. Jay Unger wrote it.
The thing I didn't know until recently was it has words to it too. I found the words on
Oh, really?
the words are just as touching as the tune. Okay.
It was the end of their fiddle